Good morning. This is Judge DePel. I am going to preside over the hearing today in place of Judge Hatcher. It is September 2nd, 2022, and this is the hearing in the matter of ER-2022-0129 and ER-2022-0130, and that is Evergy, Missouri, both Metro and West general rate cases. Let's see, before we went on the record, Mr. Stokes asked if he could introduce new counsel for staff.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the Commission, it's my privilege to introduce Eric Vandergriff to the Commission. Eric is originally from Georgia. He is an Air Force veteran, and he joined Staff Counsel's office out of the Golden Gate University School of Law.
Thank you. Welcome. And also, we do not have a court reporter again today, so this will be being recorded and transcribed after the fact. So I will remind everybody to speak into the microphones, speak slowly, speak clearly, and state who you are for ease. And just so that we can get that on the record and the court reporter can know who is here, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to make quick entries saying who's here and who's not, and that'll also help me figuring out the same thing. So, Evergy?
Yes, good morning. Jim Fisher and Roger Steiner for Evergy today.
And staff?
Eric Vandergriff for staff.
And public counsel?
John Kleiser.
MECG?
Tim Opitz for MECG.
MIEC? And I know some of the parties were previously excused, but I'm just going to run down the list. Renew Missouri?
Elisa Greenwald for Renew Missouri.
Sierra Club? St. Joseph? Dogwood? Nucor? Google? Velvet Tech? And anyone I missed? Okay, I will try to shorten that as we go today, knowing that some of those parties were previously excused. Also, we discussed there were some items that the Commission was going to take notice of, or some previous decisions, and I explained to Council before we went on the record, just as a matter of course, it's easier for the record on appeal, for the transcript in general, and for the public's access. If any of those items that the Commission takes official notice of or so forth are marked as an exhibit and gone ahead and put in the record that way, so that way on our electronic filing system we have a complete record for anybody to see. That just makes it simpler. So that's the reason for marking those things as an exhibit and treating them that way. So I think that is all I had preliminarily. Were there any council preliminary matters? Okay, not seeing any, so we can go ahead and begin with our first witness. We're doing the AMI issue today.
Your Honor,
Yes.
I believe at least some of the parties might be interested in making many openings regarding the AMI.
Oh, yes, thank you for the reminder. Yes, okay,
Hey, Judge.
Yes.
Judge, this is Commissioner Holzman. I want to go on record as being here as well.
Yeah, I apologize, Commissioner. I can't recall if we have other commissioners on already this morning.
Judge, Commissioner Sylvia is here as well.
Thank you, Chairman.
Commissioner Roop is here as well.
Thank you, commissioners. I will try to make note when the other commissioners join us. All right, then we can start with mini opening statements, and Evergy is already at the podium. Go ahead,
Thank you
Mr. Fisher.
very much, Judge. Welcome to the proceeding. And Eric, welcome to the PSC. I didn't catch your last name. It's,
Vandergriff.
okay, thank you. May it please the commission. This issue involves a disallowance by staff and public counsel of certain rate-based costs associated with the deployment of AMI meters with remote disconnect and reconnect capabilities. Both staff witness Eubanks and public counsel witness Mark expressed concerns that the AMI meters installed without remote disconnect and reconnect capability in the period of 2014 through 2016 are now being replaced by new AMI technology that has disconnect and reconnect capabilities prior to the end of the old technology's design life. Staff recommends a disallowance of $5,784,812 for the Metro case and $2,663,582 for the West case. Those numbers come from the staff's reconciliation. This is based upon retirements that occurred during the test year and the true-up period. Dr. Mark also recommends that the commission disallow costs related to any second-generation AMI meters and associated installation costs, as I understand his testimony. Mr. Chuck Casely, Evergy's Senior Vice President of Public Affairs and the Chief Customer Officer, is here to address their concerns. He does so in his various pre-filed testimonies. Mr. Casely explains that the company has embarked on a thoughtful and prudent approach to deploy AMI technology over time to our customers. AMI meters have already unlocked many benefits that are to our customers, and they're enjoying them today. Now, contrary to the public counsel's assertion that the primary benefit of ATM technology is the ability to use time of use rates, AMI meters provide many more benefits to consumers, the company, and its employees. Brad Lutz goes into these benefits in some detail in his testimony. AMI with disconnect and reconnect capabilities in particular allows the company to utilize the electronic communications and deploy remote procedures that eliminate the need for the company personnel to make physical contact with the customers. These changes result in lower costs, better collections, fewer on-premise incidents, and fewer collection errors. In addition, disconnection and reconnection fees can be drastically reduced for customers with an AMI meter with that capability. Once disconnected, the customer no longer has to call back into the contact center to request service restoration if they're served by the newer technology. When a minimum payment is received, a reconnection order is sent immediately, and the customer service is typically back on service within 15 minutes. This includes after hours, weekends, and holidays. These are clear benefits to the customer if they have the newer AMI technology that allows remote reconnection. Now, there are many other benefits to the AMI technology. For the company, it also reduces the number of truck rolls for the disconnection and reconnection. Over the long term, this will reduce the company's costs, and those savings will be passed along to customers in lower rates. There is also value to the company in having one uniform metering system rather than having to deal with two different AMI metering technologies. Another major benefit is that the new AMI technology reduces safety risks for employees since they can avoid hostile interactions with their customers at the premises. Also, the new technology, these AMI meters have onboard temperature sensing and an alarm capability. This alerts the company to issues on the premises which may cause heating at the meter, and it will reduce the potential for meter fires. Evergy is using AMI data to disaggregate energy usage so that the company can better design and develop programs for its customers, educate customers on their usage, and market to customers for increased program enrollment. One particular use mentioned by Mr. Lutz is the detection of electric vehicle charging. This capability will allow Evergy to understand the impact of electric vehicle charging demand on their system and create EV rate options from this information. Mr. Casely discusses the decision to change out the older technology with AMI meters with disconnect and reconnect capabilities. This decision was based upon a solid business case, both in the initial decision not to deploy the new technology when price differences were significantly higher than they are today, as well as the decision to later change out old AMI meters prior to the end of their design life. This is because AMI meters with disconnect and reconnect capabilities bring additional cost savings and other benefits to customers. I'd encourage the judge or the commissioners to ask Mr. Casely about the economics of changing out the existing older AMI meters with newer AMI meters that have the new reconnection capability. From my perspective, the issue for the commission to think about is fairly straightforward. Is it reasonable to install newer technology with expanded capabilities that benefit consumers or other stakeholders, even though the older technology may have some life left in it? I doubt that there are very many people in this room that still use a flip phone, even though those flip phones still technically would work and make calls. We have all upgraded to newer smartphones when the new technology advanced to provide new information services, texting capability, and high-quality cameras, all in one device. We all saw the value of upgrading to the newer smartphones, even though the old phones still worked. Mr. Brad Lutz provides testimony about the business drivers for the initial AMI deployment. At the time of the initial deployment, AMI with disconnect and reconnect capabilities were cost prohibitive, more than double the cost of the meters that were installed, and nearly 25% higher than the prices available today for the new technology. At the time the decision was made to install AMI meters without the remote disconnect and reconnect feature, the business case did not support the new technology due to the price of the meters and the fact that the legacy KCPL Metro service area was replacing older AMR systems and not the manual meter readers themselves. If the commission disallows $8 million of investments in new technology in this case, it will send a signal to Evergy and the rest of the industry that public utilities shouldn't be upgrading their old meter technology, even though the new technology brings a multitude of benefits and it makes good economic sense to upgrade to the technology. In conclusion, Evergy would respectfully request that the commission recognize the value to consumers, the company, and its employees of the newer technology and reject the proposed disallowance. Thank you for your attention and thank you for your attendance today. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I have a couple witnesses that will have a lot more in the details.
Are there any commissioner questions for Mr. Fisher? Not hearing any, so thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Judge.
Right. Am I correct that staff is next on the order?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. May it please the Commission. I am Eric Vandergriff, Staff Counsel for the Missouri Public Service Commission, and I'm joined today with Claire Eubanks, Staff Witness for Issue 4, Advanced Meter Infrastructure. Staff recommends the Commission disallow $6.3 million from Evergy Metro and $2.9 million from Evergy Metro West. These numbers come from staff's rebuttal. Evergy Missouri Metro and Evergy Missouri West are prematurely replacing AMI meters with AMI meters that have remote disconnect and reconnect capabilities. Staff is also concerned that Evergy Missouri is prioritizing customers in arrears for those premature AMI replacements. In summary, staff asked the Commission to order its proposed disallowance and to take note of staff's concerns over the premature replacements.
Thank you. Are there any commissioner questions for staff counsel? Seeing none, before you leave the podium, just for our remote court reporter transcribing, could you spell your name for us?
V as in Victor, A, N, D as in Delta, E, R, G as in Golf, R, I, F as in Frank, and F as in Frank.
Thank you. And that's Eric with a C?
Eric with a C.
Thank you. And I believe next is MECG?
I have no opening for this issue. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, MIEC, Renew, Sierra Club, Charge Point, St. Joseph, Dogwood. Do we have someone from Dogwood? Nucor, Google, Velvet, and Public Counsel?
May it please the Commission. John Kleiser, on behalf of the Missouri Office of the Public Counsel. So let's start off by setting the record straight. This issue is not about whether or not AMI SD, those are service disconnect meters, are good or bad technology. The company wants to portray this as a replacement of old, obsolete technology. They liken it to replacing a flip phone with your smartphone. The critical problem there is that AMI SD existed at the time that the original AMI meters were put in place. And the argument by staff and OPC is not, boy, you shouldn't have put in AMI SDs now. It's, why did you not put in the AMI SD in 2014? The company will tell you it was more expensive. This is flat out false. It would have been less expensive. It would have saved customers considerable money to have put in AMI SD in 2014 and throughout the course of the AMR replacement than to have put in AMI and then replaced it with additional AMI SDs. Let's just call this what it is. It's gold plating, plain and simple. Evergy installed hundreds of thousands of AMI meters and is now trying to rip those meters out before they are fully recovered. These meters, mind you, have an average service life of 20 years based on their battery life, but the average that we're seeing them removed is only 5. Even in the best case scenario for the company, a meter could only have been in for 8 years. That's less than 40% of its life. And again, that's best case scenario. The vast majority of these meters have been in for far shorter periods of time. Just think about it. Not a single one of these meters has been able to collect 50% of their value, 50% of their use before they're being ripped out. This is completely unacceptable. It's an effort by company to build rate base brought on by Evergy's fear of its former active investor, Elliott Management. And let's think for a minute about what customers have received for these AMI meters. that are now being replaced. The company might disagree, but the literature clearly states that the biggest benefit to residential customers for having AMI meters is the ability to use time of use, or TOU rates. Yet even now, the company still resists having default time of use rates. Despite the Commission sending clear signals across multiple cases, despite 14 studies on the topic that have told us how beneficial time of use rates are, despite both Ameren and Empire moving to default use time of rates, Evergy still resists. And now the company is seeking to add insult to injury by demanding its customers reimburse them for not just one, but two underutilized meters. And keep in mind that there are a number of states that have flat out rejected AMI rollout in its entirety. Utility commissions in New Mexico, Massachusetts, Kentucky, and Virginia have all rejected proposals for AMI meters. Evergy, by contrast, feels so entitled to recover this second set of meters, it did not even bother to address this issue in direct testimony. And even that still doesn't cover all of the problems with this issue. Evergy has already spent nearly $300 million on a billing system that was first acquired specifically to utilize AMI and allow time of use rates. The company is further specifically targeting customers with high arrearages, as was mentioned by counsel for staff, in order to instead of more efficiently replacing meters based on neighborhoods by batch. This adds a potential element of economic discrimination to the already troubling mix. If absolutely nothing else, the optics of this are alarming. As I said a moment ago, this is simple gold plating. The OPC is asking the Commission to protect customers by ensuring that one customer only has to pay for 1 meter. 1 meter, 1 person. It's as simple as that. I also want to briefly mention, counsel for Evergy warned you that disallowing these meters would send a signal that AMI SD, or potentially AMI investment, is not favored in Missouri. I want to allow you to know that's not a concern. Ameren and Empire have already fully deployed AMI SD. It's Evergy that's the problem child. They're the only ones who ran out AMI first and are now seeking to replace after the fact, before the full value of the investment can be recovered. Today, you will hear testimony from both OPC and staff, who will together tell you why there is such a major problem with Evergy's bid to prematurely replace its AMI meters and create yet another stranded asset. The OPC and staff are essentially in lockstep on this issue, and I encourage you to ask either the OPC or staff witnesses any questions you might have. In particular, if there is anything that I have said in this opening that gives you pause, ask the OPC's witness, and we can fully support everything I've said. Just ask our witnesses. With that, I'll pause to see if there's any questions.
Are there any commissioner questions for public counsel? Not hearing any. Thank you, sir. All right. I believe that's all of the opening statements. If I miss someone, please speak up. So we can begin then with Evergy's first witness.
Company calls Bradley Lutz.
Please let me swear you in, sir. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give at this hearing will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And if you could spell your name for the court reporter.
Brad Lutz, B-R-A-D-L-U-T-Z.
Thank you. Go ahead.
This is Roger Steiner for the company. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Brad Lutz, L-U-T-Z.
Mr. Lutz, where do you work?
I work at Evergy in the Regulatory Affairs Department.
And what is your position there?
I'm a director in that department.
Mr. Lutz, did you cause be prepared direct testimony, which has been pre-marked, excuse me, let me get this right. Did you cause to be prepared direct testimony in the Evergy, Missouri Metro case, which has been pre-marked as Exhibit 44?
I did.
Excuse me. I got to wake up here. Direct testimony, which has been pre-marked as Exhibit 49.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I did.
Rebuttal testimony, a confidential version, which has been marked as Exhibit 50.
I did.
Rebuttal testimony, a public version, which has been marked as Exhibit 51.
I did.
Surrebuttal testimony, which has been marked as Exhibit 52.
I did.
And in the Evergy, Missouri West case, did you pre-file direct testimony, which has been marked as Exhibit 117?
I did.
Do you have any corrections to these testimonies that I mentioned?
I do not.
Are the answers contained in the testimonies I mentioned true and correct to the best of your information and belief?
They are.
Your Honor, I'd like to move for the admission of the direct rebuttal and surrebuttal testimonies of Brad Lutz that I just mentioned.
Are there any objection to Exhibits 49, 50, 51, 52, and 117? Seeing none, I will admit those exhibits.
Thank you. I tender this witness for cross-examination.
Thank you. Now I'm going off of the order of cross that I have here, so if I, again, get that wrong, please let me know. And I'm just going to read everybody, so I apologize if we're extending things here a little. ChargePoint, Google, Nucor, Velvet, St. Joseph, Dogwood, Sierra Club, Renew.
No questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. MIEC and MECG.
No, thank you, Judge.
Staff,
No questions, Your Honor.
Public Counsel.
No questions, Your Honor.
All right. Are there any commissioner questions for Mr. Lutz? I'm not hearing any. And I do not have any questions either, Mr. Lutz, so you're getting off easy today. We appreciate your participation.
Thank you.
You may be excused. Evergy's next witness.
This is Jim Fisher. I would call Mr. Charles Caseley to the stand.
Could you please raise your right hand so I can swear you in? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give at this hearing will be the truth?
I do, Your Honor.
Thank you. And could you spell your name for the court reporter, please?
Yes, it is Caissley.
Go ahead.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Charles Caissley, Caissley, 1200 Main Street, Kansas City, Missouri.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Evergy and their chief customer officer.
Did you cause to be filed in this proceeding direct testimony, which has been pre-marked as Exhibit 19 in the confidential version, direct testimony, the public version, number 20, rebuttal testimony, marked 21, and number 22 was Caseley surrebuttal confidential, and 23, Caseley surrebuttal public version. That is in the Metro case. And in the Missouri West case, direct testimony confidential 107 and direct testimony public version 108. Did you cause those to be prepared and filed in this case?
I did, yes.
Did you have any corrections that you needed to make?
Yes, to the rebuttal testimony, there is one page, one word that I need to change. It is page 20, line 22. The word sought needs to be replaced with the word received.
And what line was that on?
Line 22.
22, okay.
And what was that exhibit number? Excuse me.
That is the rebuttal testimony, and that was Exhibit 21.
Thank you.
With that change, if I were to ask you the questions that are contained in those various testimonies, would your answers be the same, and are they correct as far as you know and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
With that, Judge, I think I would just tender Mr. Casely for any cross and questions from the bench or the commissioners.
All right, thank you. I'm going to try to skip those that aren't here, and if I miss somebody, please speak up. MIEC, any cross? MECG,
No, thank you, Your Honor.
staff,
No questions, Your Honor.
OPC.
No questions, thank you.
Well, Mr. Casely, you're doing it again. I have no questions. Oh, let me ask the commissioners quickly. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Casely?
Judge, this is Commissioner Sylvie.
Yes.
Just briefly, Mr. Casely, I don't have that exhibit in front of me at the moment, so would you please just read the corrected sentence so I kind of get a context of what it is that you're changing?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. It's, again, it's page 20 of rebuttal testimony. I will actually start on line 21 and read through the end of the sentence. So, as the commission is aware, we have not yet received authority to utilize AMI meters to disconnect customers.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Casely. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Judge, this is Commissioner Holzman. I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Casely. OPC mentioned that in 2014, you had the same opportunities you do now with installing these AMI meters. Can you elaborate a little bit on what was the decision-making at that time to forego at that moment?
Certainly, Commissioner. So I think a couple of things. First of all, unlike our utility peers at that time, Evergy, which was then KCP&L, already had deployed meters with telecommunication technology, meaning they could be remotely read. It was AMR, which is one way. There's not two-way communication like in the modern AMI, but we had meters that you did not have to send a truck out to actually read them, and we didn't estimate bills. That's different relative to the other utilities, electric utilities in the state at the time. At the end of 2013, 2014 time period, couple things. One, that technology was not going to be supported anymore, and the contract for those CellNet meters were expiring. And so we had to make a decision as to what kind of meter to deploy. And at that time, the AMI SD meter was available. That is factually correct. But it was about $165 a meter to install, whereas AMI technology without that was around $75, $76. So it's more than double the differential. So we made the decision at that point, because of the fact that a lot of the value you get from deploying an AMI SD meter is the value of not having to roll a truck to disconnect or to reconnect to start or to stop service at that time with the technology, the CIS, the meter data management, and the other systems we had in place. Because there wasn't a differential for us. In other words, the business case, we weren't going to, because of Rule 13 or Chapter 13 rules, we weren't going to be able to not knock and collect. And our systems at the time wouldn't have handled a lot of the other technology that was available. So it just didn't make business sense to deploy a $165 meter at that time. Now, as we go forward and several years later, a lot of that value was unlocked by our new systems that we installed beginning in the 2017 time period. So it's not just the knock and collect, remote connect and disconnect, but there's a bevy of other things that the system can handle. And all of those, we did a business case, and all of those, actually 2 analyses, showed that it was either neutral or beneficial to customers. So at the original time period, it didn't make sense, largely because we already had, the biggest part of the value was we weren't reading meters in person at the time then, unlike other utilities. But now there's a bevy of other advantages that our systems can take advantage of that we do go ahead and we can use the SD meters. And again, it says service disconnect, but there on page 13, I believe it is, of my rebuttal testimony, there's an entire page, 26 different value streams that we have looked at that we are either now currently using or can use in the future, near future, to benefit customers.
And what is the cost of the meter today?
Well, when we
It was
start,
160 back then. What's it looking at now?
when we started deployment, it was around $125. That price has gone down a little bit in recent years, but it's for the purposes of this case and what's in testimony, it's $125.
Okay, my last question is OPC had mentioned that Ameren and Liberty have already gone this route and that Missouri wasn't any worse off for it. Why would KCP&L, if this were denied, be any different than those other 2 companies in the state?
I might not understand your question, Commissioner. You mean, essentially, we would not be able.
If KCP&L says that this were disallowed, it would somehow reflect on the state of Missouri that it's hostile to this technology. But if Ameren and Liberty have already been adopted and approved, that according to OPC, again, I'm basing off of their previous testimony, how is that different for KCP&L?
Well,
I'm sorry, Evergy, my apologies.
That's all right. I still do that sometimes too, Commissioner. I think at the end of the day, clearly, Missouri has evidenced its willingness to support AMI technology. I think in this case, what would happen is we would stop deploying the AMI SD meters with all the benefits that come along with them. We'd have 2 systems. We'd have customers treated 2 different ways, and ultimately, from a number of different angles, including programs and rates that are available to them, we just have 2 differently positioned entities. And I think that's confusing to customers, and it's something that we would like to avoid.
Okay, and in the further testimony, you mentioned electric vehicle charging. How would the AMI benefit electric vehicle charging as far as the customer is concerned and as far as the company is concerned when it comes to load and those types of issues?
Well, that's a great question. One of the benefits of the new Focus meters that we have, the Focus AX SD meters, is that it is a lot better and coupled with our CIS system and our meter data management systems now can disaggregate load behind the meter, significant load. And so whether it's HVAC load, whether it is electric vehicle load, it can disaggregate that load at the meter and allow us to give different pricing options because of that disaggregation. The other thing that it can do is this is a mesh meter, meaning the communications it can talk to other devices that are on the system, whether it be a transformer, whether it be capacitor banks. It can talk to other things that exist on the system, and as a result, it can see things like voltage swells or swags, which could be caused by sags, which could be caused by increased penetration of electric vehicle charging. It's just a variety of other things that this meter can do from a technology standpoint that the ones that are currently deployed cannot.
Are they set up to prepare for when the vehicles start providing storage capacity for the home and flowing backwards, or a distributed generation customer who's already net metering? How do they interact with the prospect of those features?
So from a capability of reading what is going on in the environment, this meter is considerably advanced over the Focus AL meters that are there now. So all of those kinds of things from a data analytics and a communications to other devices on our system are more advanced and would be better served by this meter.
And it doesn't have any different interplay with the net metered customer?
For a net metered customer, it's possible it could. I think you probably have to get into some of the regulatory rules there, and there might have to be some waivers that we would have to look into for that. From a technology capability, it certainly could. From a rules perspective, I think we'd have to look at that. Right now, you'd be required to have another meter.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Casely. Informative as always. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioner questions?
Thank you, Judge. This is Commissioner Kochmeyer. I have no questions at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Judge, this is Commissioner Sylvie. I have a follow-up based on Commissioner Holzman's questions, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Casely. He just asked about possible future grid updates that would allow bidirectional flow and how this meter played into it. And I didn't quite get your answer on that. Will these meters allow for a bidirectional grid, or would that be another meter at some point in the future that would have to replace this one we're talking about today?
So I think there's really three responses to that. One, no, this does not measure bidirectional flow, is my understanding, subject to check. But it does have advanced analytics such that we can disaggregate things behind the meter. So this would allow us potentially to come up with a way with our meter data management system and our new billing system to potentially solve for that. That's not something we have the capability of doing now, and I believe, again, subject to check, our regulatory folks probably know better, that the rules in Missouri right now would require 2 meters to measure the flow in and flow out. However, it is conceivable that this could handle this just from a data analytics and load disaggregation perspective. That is not something we've tried yet, but the capabilities could exist, we believe do exist in conjunction with our new system, that we could disaggregate that load. Again, that's not something that we've put into practice today, and we'd have to do some more work before we knew that for sure. For right now, you would have to have a second meter installed on the home.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Casey. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Any further commissioner questions? Okay, I'm not hearing any, and I do not have any questions for you.
Hey, Judge, this is Commissioner Roop. I have a question that just popped in here.
Sure, go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, again, for the court reporter, this is Commissioner Scott Roop, RUPP. Mr. Casely, so in your previous response to either Commissioner Holzman or Commissioner Sylvia, I couldn't remember, why would you have to stop deploying new meters in the future if this was denied?
Well, I guess strictly speaking, we wouldn't have to, but if the commission were to deny the recovery of the investment, it would be an economic choice that we would make. We wouldn't continue to deploy things that that we wouldn't recover.
Okay, and what's your timetable for finishing deployment?
I think we are currently scheduled to be done in 2024, but my guess is, given the pace that we're going right now, that it could be that we would finish up even as early as the end of next year. But currently, we're scheduled to go through around the middle of 2024.
Great. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further commissioner questions? All right. We'll do additional cross-examination based on questions from the bench. Are there any questions from ChargePoint, Google, Nucor, Velvet, St. Joseph, Dogwood, Sierra Club, Renew,
No questions, Your Honor.
MIEC, MECG,
No, thank you, Your Honor.
staff?
Yes, Your Honor. If the commission disallowed for the old meters, would you still continue to move forward with the new ones?
If I understand your question correctly, if the commission were to disallow for the undepreciated life of the Focus AL or the existing meters, but granted recovery for the ones that we have put into service to date, yes, we would continue to deploy those meters.
No further questions.
Thank you. Anything from public counsel?
Yes, I think, just briefly. I want to walk through the math that was discussed here. So I want to make sure I have this correct. Your position is that to install an AMI meter, not SD, but a regular AMI meter. Oh, by the way, this is John Kleiser for OPC. I apologize, I forgot that earlier.
Go ahead.
Let me start my question over. If you were to install a regular AMI meter, not SD, in 2014, it would have been about $75.
Sorry, I gotta remember to sit up by the microphone. So you're saying the Focus AL non-SD meter in 2014 was right around $75, $76.
And if you then replaced it with I believe they're the Focus AX
That's
SD meter, now, presently, it'd be about 125. I know you said it went down, but in testimony, it's 125.
That's correct.
So to install and then replace is a sum of 75 plus 125. I'm not great at math, but I think that's 210.
200.
Like I said, I'm not great at math. You are correct. Sorry about that. Versus 165 if you had just put the AMI SD in place in 2014, correct?
That's correct.
And if you had just put the AMI SD in place in 2014, all of your meter deployment would be AMI SD at this point, right?
That is correct.
So if you had installed the AMI SD in 2014, it would have saved customers money, and you would have had all the meters in place now, and you would have all the capabilities that you are now touting as a benefit for the AMI SD faster, correct?
It wouldn't have saved customers money, but we would have had those benefits. Those benefits, capabilities would have been available because we didn't have a CIS system, a meter data management system, or a variety of the other things that we put in 2017 and 2018. No, we would not have had all of those benefits. And we wouldn't have any of the benefits of the SD meter because they were either prohibited by the commission and by commission rule, or we didn't have the capabilities to use them. And as I said before, unlike Ameren and Liberty, who had analog meters and were still going out and reading meters, that's not something that we did, so we couldn't count that in the business case.
I think you might have misheard me. You would have had all those benefits now.
Yes, we would have had all those benefits now.
In fact, customers would have gotten those benefits faster.
I don't know that I would agree with that, no, but
Fair enough. The company at 2014 had no way of looking to say, what are we planning to do in the future? Were you making any forward plans in 2014?
of course, we do like any utility or any company, of course.
How
we do.
long had you planned or considered the One CIS investment?
It was not we knew we had an end of life for those platforms coming up, but we hadn't made any decisions yet with respect to what we were going to replace it and what the timeline was going to be.
You mentioned the commission rules would have prohibited you from performing no-knock disconnects, for example.
That's correct.
The commission rules still prohibit you from performing no-knock disconnects, correct?
That is correct.
It's just a matter of asking for a waiver.
That's correct.
And you could have asked for a waiver in 2014, just as you're asking for a waiver now, correct?
We could have, yes.
All right. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to redirect, I don't think we actually admitted Mr. Casely's testimony.
I'm sorry, Judge, I was distracted. Go ahead, please.
I don't think we actually admitted Mr.
You know, I think you're
Casely's-
right, and I apologize. I should have asked that all those exhibits be admitted at that time.
Having offered exhibits 21, 22, 23, 107, and 108, are there any objections to those exhibits? Seeing none, I will admit those exhibits. And Mr. Fisher, when you're ready, go ahead with your redirect.
Mr. Case, I'd like to follow up on just some of the questions that came from the commissioners particularly. Commissioner Holtzman asked you about your 2014 decision and the reasons you didn't deploy the new technology at that time. And I think you mentioned the price of $165 per meter. Do you recall that discussion?
I do, yes.
Were there other reasons that also factored into your decision at that time besides the $165?
Well, for sure, cost was a big part of it, but as I mentioned in the discussion with counsel for OPC, you know, we had an old, kind of uniquely constructed billing system and meter analysis system, and so most of the features that we can take advantage of now simply were not available to unlock given those systems back then.
Did KCPL have some AMR meters, and could you explain what that is and why that factored in, if it did?
Yeah, absolutely, and that gets the other central reason, which was one of the biggest values or drivers of other utilities making the switch to AMI SD is the ability to not have to go out and read. They could justify that higher price because they didn't have to go out, they could stop rolling trucks to read meters. That wasn't something that we could put into the value calculation for us because we already had AMR meters, which means we hadn't been doing that for years. And so that is a huge part of the business case to replace and spend $165 a meter is stopping to roll trucks to go read meters. And we already had stopped that, so we couldn't put that into the calculation.
Before we leave that discussion about the dollars, I believe Public Counsel tried to walk you through the math, I think he said, and suggested that it was a more expensive decision. Do you have a response to that?
I do, and I understand if you just do simple math and add two things together, you get to 200, and 200's obviously more than 165, and that seems like a no-brainer. But what that doesn't account for is the time value of money and the investment. So if you do a net present value calculation, which is something that we do in a lot of other procedures in front of the commission, including integrated resource planning and others. If you discount back to 2014 and you look at it, what you get to is about $152 per meter or for the AMR, AMI without and AMI with the remote connect and disconnect feature, which is less than the 165. Again, it's just a net present value calculation that you have to do.
And that's a positive from the consumer's perspective, is that what you're saying?
It is. It's from our analysis, it's close enough that it's a break even to slightly positive, yes.
Now, in 2014, when you were making that decision, did you know what the prices for the new meter technology would be 5, 6, 7 years later?
No, we did not.
I know you have a law degree. Are you familiar with the prudence standard and the use of hindsight?
Yes, I am.
Would it be appropriate from your standpoint to analyze this issue by looking at what the prices actually turned out to be?
No, not under the standard practice and rules in Missouri.
I believe you also mentioned in your answer to Commissioner Holtzman that you have quite a number of values that were unlocked that you discuss in your testimony. I'd like for you to just give the top three that you think it unlocked.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So first of all, there's a lot of focus on the disconnect part of the SD meter. Almost all of the testimony from other parties focuses on that. We like to focus on the reconnect part of it. So right now, it can take sometimes a day, and if you do it after hours on Friday or Saturday or Sunday, it can take 2 or 3 days, non-business days, or a holiday to start service or to restart service. So one of the things that we think is a very big benefit for this is the ability to reconnect quickly. We also think that in areas, and this is becoming more and more prevalent, where you have high turnover, and it can be a variety of different things, like the college rush or apartment buildings, and we're seeing more and more apartment buildings in our service territory, whether it's urban or suburban, where there's higher amounts of turnover. Again, this eliminates truck rolls to turn on and turn off. But probably I'd say the other things that make these meters valuable and things that we're using today is the safety aspects of it, whether it's temperature alerts, whether it's the diagnostics around the ecosystem of distribution that serves a customer. We can get into a lot more about what's going on, not just whether service is on or off. That's another benefit of this, is real-time outage notifications. And then as we look to the future and we look at more complex rate structures, we look at more complex ecosystems, whether it's solar or whether it's electric vehicle charging, whether it's battery storage. Those are all things that are unlocked by the data analytics and the nature of these new meters. And that's just a few. I mean, again, we could talk probably all day about this, but in page 13 of my rebuttal testimony is a list of 26 benefits, some that we are using today, around 20 of them, and some that are future state near follow items.
Are there any unlocked values to this technology for your employees?
Absolutely, and something that we will continue after this case is resolved to request the commission. We would like to get to a point where we can waive knock and collect and do remote disconnects. It seems like society is getting more and more aggressive and tempestuous these days, and so that's a safety issue of people knocking at the door and saying, we're going to disconnect your electricity service. Every time you walk through a yard, you face dangers like dogs or just, you wouldn't think it, but just this summer we had a huge outbreak of poison ivy amongst some of our meter readers. And then, of course, to the extent that folks aren't in their cars and driving high numbers of vehicle miles, it's preventable vehicle accidents and all sorts of things like that are reduced. So there's a real safety benefit to our employees for this as well.
During your discussion with Commissioner Holtzman, I believe he asked about Ameren and Liberty. Does Ameren have a waiver, to your knowledge, of the no-knock rules?
They do, yes.
And do you recall whether the company actually had filed? I believe you changed that in your testimony, but did the company file a pleading asking for no-knock waiver at one point?
Yes, we have.
Okay. Was there any other difference between the situation with KCPL back in 2014 and Ameren and Liberty regarding your situation with CellNet, I believe, compared to their situation? And could you explain that?
Yeah, so again, the CellNet meters were AMR, and so they're automatically read, which means it would send to our distribution system a one-way signal that allowed us to remotely read usage, which is different than analog or non-cell equipped meters, which were prevalent for Ameren and Liberty during that time period.
So did Ameren effectively go from an analog and leapfrog over to the new technology, but you had already employed the AMR technology earlier?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Judge, I think that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Casely, the AMR, can you just define that acronym for me?
Automated meter reading.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted that to be clear. I believe then that is all the questions we have for you, and you may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Does Evergy have another witness?
No, Judge, that's all the witnesses on this issue.
Oh,
I believe staff is next with Ms. Eubanks, maybe?
okay, thank you. I had an extra on my list. Staff may call its witness.
Staff calls Clary Banks.
You please raise your right hand, Ms. Eubanks. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. If you could spell your name for us.
Claire Eubanks, CLAIRE EUBANKS.
Okay, go ahead.
Please state your name for the record.
Claire Eubanks.
Are you employed by the staff of the commission, and in what capacity?
I am. I'm the manager of the Engineering Analysis Department.
Have you filed in this proceeding a direct marked as Exhibit 211, both public and confidential?
I have.
A rebuttal marked as 238, public and confidential?
Yes.
And a surrebuttal marked as Exhibit 262, both public and confidential?
Yes.
Do you have any corrections to make on those documents?
I do not.
If I were to ask you the questions in those documents, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Are those same answers true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Your Honor, staff moves to Exhibits 211, 238, and 262 into evidence.
Thank you. Are there any objections to Exhibits 211, 238, and 262, all of which I believe have both a confidential and a public version? Seeing no objection, I will admit those exhibits.
Staff tenders Claire Eubanks for cross and redirect.
And is there any cross-examination from public counsel?
There is, Your Honor. I will proceed. This is John Kleiser for Public Counsel.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Ms. Eubanks.
Good morning.
You were here in the hearing room earlier when Mr. Casely was testifying, correct?
Yes.
You recall Mr. Casely suggesting that AMR deployment was unique to Evergy?
I do.
Ameren, Missouri had also deployed AMR prior to switching to AMI, correct?
That is correct.
Ameren, Missouri made the decision to switch directly from AMR to AMI SD, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Casely discussed his net present value calculation. Do you recall that?
He did.
In your surrebuttal, I believe you took issue with that net present value calculation, correct?
Are you talking about both financial reviews or one or the other?
I believe you took issue with both, correct?
That's correct.
Let's start with the first one.
Let me refresh my memory on which one's
Take
the
your
first
time.
one.
And while she is doing that, I will point out to Your Honor that there is quite a bit of confidential information here. I am going to do my best to ask questions in such a way as to avoid directly addressing the confidential information to prevent us from needing to go in camera, but I guess I will try and go slowly in case Evergy feels the need to take us in camera for anything.
All right, and I will ask Evergy to speak up quickly if you feel that getting into an area that should be in camera.
I believe on page 6 of your surrebuttal, in describing the first financial review and the net present value calculation, you determined that it does not demonstrate that there are cost savings to the AMI SD meter rollout. Is that correct?
That's correct. So what the calculations show from what Evergy presented is what they're saying is essentially it's neutral, the planned deployment. The drawback to what they have done is they are not considering the investment that they have already made in AMI meters into the net present value revenue requirement additions.
So the statements Mr. Casely said earlier about it being cheaper, you would disagree with that, correct?
I would.
And as for the second review, I believe you also took issue for that as well.
Yeah, so the second review, I mean, what I'm saying is I think it's irrelevant. Coming up onto the stand today, my understanding that no party was suggesting that the company should have installed AMI SD meters back in 2014, rather that the deployment that they are doing now in situations where there's not a reason to replace the meter. You know, if it's broken, if a customer requests, you know, net metering and interconnection, you know, if there's access issues, none of those are included in staff's disallowance. The only thing that's included in staff's disallowance is when they've replaced an AMI meter only to get the service disconnect capability, and those customers who are in arrears, and those when the company wasn't able to demonstrate why they changed the meter.
So actually, that brings me to my next question. I want to understand exactly what you're disallowing. And I'm going to ask this question, you can tell me if I've got it right. You are disallowing, or rather removing from the company's cost of service, the remaining, effectively the remaining unrecovered value of the retired AMI meter. Am I right?
I estimated the cost of the new meters that they have installed that are related to the deployment of AMI SD meters when they replace an AMI meter.
All right, that answers my question. Thank you. You had just briefly mentioned it, so I guess I'll ask a question. It is your understanding that the company is specifically targeting customers who are currently in arrears when making the decision to replace meters, correct?
In reviewing the data supplied by the company, they, beginning, well, at least in a handful of cases in 2018, had in their notes that this customer is in arrears, we're switching to an SD meter. A little bit more aggressively in the 2020 timeframe, I believe. They started with the customers with the highest arrearages, $700, moving down to the lowest arrearages to $150, specifically switching out those meters for those customers.
All of the benefits to the existing AMI SD meters that the company is seeking to install existed in 2014, as far as the meter themselves.
My understanding is that AMI SD meters were were considered by the company in 2014 when they chose to deploy the Focus AL meters.
All of the discussion regarding the cost of meters, has that been, in your understanding, the cost of the meter plant itself?
Can you rephrase the question?
Regarding the discussion of the cost of meters, whether AMI or SD, the numbers that have been presented, has it been your understanding that that refers to the original cost of service of the plant itself?
the numbers that we've talked about today.
Yes.
So the $125 value is, like an average number is probably a fair way of putting it.
Let me rephrase or try from a different angle then. Have any of these costs included any amount capitalized for the installation of meters?
So in the net present value revenue requirement financial review that the company did, they included a meter credit of $35, which is the capitalization of labor, moving it from O&M to capital. So there was also an adjustment to the capital cost of the meters to adjust for that. Is that what you're asking?
I'm just wanting to try and understand, is that $35 you're referring to included, is your understanding it's included in the $75, $125, $165 amounts?
It is not included in the $125 amount.
I'll just leave it at that because I'm afraid I'm going to make things even more confused.
Is that all, Mr. Kleiser?
One last question, I think. To your knowledge, has there been an additional truck roll? Meaning, has the company been required to go out to the premise of a residential customer in order to replace the existing AMI meter with a new AMI SD meter?
They would have to go to the residents to replace the meter.
That was my last question. Thank you.
Is there any cross-examination from MECG?
Ms. Eubanks, these meter replacements, can you tell me which customer class these meters are replacing?
So
Which customer class are these meters, are the customers getting these meters in?
it would be, probably all customers except for large industrial customers.
Thank you.
Anything from Renew Missouri?
No questions, Your Honor.
And Evergy?
Oh, just briefly, Judge, this is Jim Fisher for the reporter. Ms. Eubanks, as I understood your testimony to public counsel, I believe, and I may not have got the quote exactly right, but did you suggest that no party in this case is suggesting that the company should not or should have employed the new technology, the one that has the remote disconnect and reconnect in 2014?
That was my understanding reading direct and rebuttal testimony. That's on page 6 of my rebuttal testimony.
Okay, that's great. So is it correct then that staff believes the company made a prudent decision in 2014 to deploy what it did?
Staff is not disputing that in this case. The 2014 deployment was a subject of the 2018 rate cases, I understand it. So we did not go back and kind of rethink that decision.
Okay. And of course, that was based upon the information they knew at the time, is that right?
What staff knew at the time.
Okay, and what you...
And chose to look at, yeah.
Okay. And I believe you also said, and maybe I got this wrong, but the company upgraded essentially to the new technology, and the part I was interested in was only to get the disconnect capability? Is that what you said?
That is what I said.
Okay. Does the new technology also give you the ability to reconnect?
It does, yes. To me, reconnect, disconnect, I apologize, I was using that simultaneously.
You understand
Yes.
there are savings with not having to roll a truck to reconnect services too, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I know you reviewed the testimony of Brad Lutz and your testimony in some detail. Does staff agree that disconnect and reconnect capabilities allow the company to utilize electronic communications and deploy remote procedures that eliminate the need for the company personnel to make physical contacts with the customers?
Can you point me to the page and line that
Well,
you're referencing?
Yeah, I know the page that you began your discussion of Mr. Lutz's testimony was on page 2 of your rebuttal. I was actually referring to a statement he had made on page 38, line 10 of his testimony, his direct testimony.
Okay, page 38, line.
Line 10. I think there he testified that I think I'll quote it, disconnect and reconnect capabilities allow the company to utilize electronic communications and deploy remote procedures that eliminate the need for company personnel to make physical contact.
So, and I think the commission's well aware, and we've talked about this today, we still have knock and collect rules that would require the company to make contact for disconnections.
But you agree with that statement, don't you, from Mr. Lutz?
With the understanding that there needs to be a waiver from the disconnect rules.
I'll accept that.
And I don't think that, it's not going to completely eliminate all company personnel contacts with customers, I don't believe.
Did staff support the waiver of the no-knock waiver in the Ameren situation?
The Ameren situation was quite a bit different.
Did staff support?
And staff, ultimately, my recollection is there's a stipulation and agreement that was well thought out and had a lot of stakeholder interest.
Did Liberty, so you did support the waiver in the Ameren case, right?
There was a stipulation and agreement in the Ameren case.
And that was for approval of the waiver?
Yeah, I don't have all the details, but generally that's my understanding.
Was there also an agreement with Liberty to have a waiver for no-knock?
I don't recall. Apologize.
Okay, that's no problem. On page 38 of Mr. Lutz's testimony at lines 12 through 14, the testimony you reviewed, he said that these changes result in lower costs, better collections, fewer on-premise incidents, collection errors, and fewer disconnections. Do you disagree with that?
I think what is important is the number of instances that occur, and I would direct the commission to look at my surrebuttal testimony exhibit.
Okay, but do you disagree with that statement?
I guess depending on what he means by lower costs. Lower O&M cost is a potential, but we haven't seen actual demonstration that has occurred.
But you're supporting that type of system for Ameren and Liberty, correct?
Ameren and Liberty deployment of AMI-SD meters, as we discussed, and Mr. Casely discussed this morning, is different than what Evergy has done.
I understand, but with reference to lower costs, don't you agree that for these utilities in Missouri that this technology will produce lower costs if they have remote disconnect and reconnect capabilities?
Not without clarifying all the other factors that go into it. The customers are still paying for meters that are not in use.
Do you agree that disconnect and reconnect capabilities would result in fewer on-premises incidents with customers, with angry customers?
Staff has not included any of the instances where the field staff indicated there was an access issue. Those are not included in staff's disallowance. Staff is not disputing the company replacing AMI meters when there's access issues,
Okay.
dog incidents and that. And I encourage you to look to my rebuttal testimony schedules, which will say how many of those instances have occurred.
Mr. Lutz also testified on line 21 of that page, I think, that when a minimum payment is received, a reconnection order is sent immediately, and the customer's service is typically back on within 15 minutes. Do you have any reason to disagree with that?
My understanding is it happens quite quickly.
Very good. And is it also your understanding that as a result of this technology, they can reconnect during after hours, during weekends, and during holidays?
That's correct.
And would you see that as a benefit to customers?
I also see lower rates as a benefit to customers.
But you would agree that that convenience is a benefit to customers,
That
right?
convenience is a benefit to customers.
And then on page 39 of Mr. Lutz's testimony at page 7, or line 7 through 8, he says that reduced safety risks for employees conducting manual reading activities or debt collection resulting from hostile interactions at the premise. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you have any reason to disagree with that?
That those instances occur.
Well,
I've seen evidence that the company has replaced meters when there was access issues,
Yeah.
such as hostile interactions at the premises.
Yeah, it's a benefit that there's reduced safety risks as a result of this technology. Right, we don't disagree with that, right?
I think we don't disagree with that, no.
Okay. And I believe in answer to questions perhaps from public counsel, you were suggesting that there was some evidence the company was, I think you used the word targeting arrears customers. Is that right?
I don't recall if I used the word targeting or not.
Okay. Well, would you agree that in situations like multi-tenant apartment buildings where there would be probably expected to be more turnover, more people connecting and more people disconnecting, and it would make sense that there might be more of a benefit to have a reconnect capability in that situation than there would just an old residence like my house that's been there for 38 years?
I do not disagree that the company has targeted apartment complexes and residents like that for part of the service disconnect rollout.
Would you also agree that residences that would typically contain college students that move in and out almost every year, that this technology would be very helpful in reducing costs to be able to disconnect and reconnect remotely?
I have not seen any evidence presented by the company that those are the apartment complexes that were.
But intuitively, wouldn't it make sense that that kind of a situation, it would be helpful to have that kind of capability?
Can you rephrase the question?
Well, sure. Let's look down the street at Columbia, where they have, I don't know, 20 or 30,000 kids that come in and out every year, and they generally move around most years to different apartments. Wouldn't it make sense that a company that was serving that area that had remote reconnection capability or disconnection capability, it would make sense economically to have the better technology in place for those kinds of situations?
My understanding of the company's work papers is they did not take that into account specifically.
Okay, well, maybe it's not in the work papers, but doesn't it make sense that that would intuitively be a good thing in that situation? If
Yeah,
you don't know, that's fine. I just, it just seems to make sense from an intuitive standpoint, doesn't it?
Maybe
Yeah, no.
from an intuitive standpoint, but if you're not taking all
Excuse
facts
me,
into consideration.
Objection. This question calls for speculation
I'll withdraw
and
it.
relevance.
I'll withdraw, Judge. That's not a
Thank you.
problem. Mr. Lutz also mentions on page 39 at line 11 that also the AMI meters have onboard temperature sensing and alarm capability. This alerts the company to issues on the premises which cause heating at the meter, reducing the potential for meter socket fires. Do you see that?
I do see that.
Do you have any reason to disagree with that?
I don't have a reason to disagree with that.
Do you think that would be a benefit to customers?
Potentially.
Okay. Judge, that's all the questions I have. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you. Are there any commissioner questions for Ms. Eubanks?
Judge, this is Commissioner Sylvie. I do have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Eubanks, it's been insinuated by OPC that in 2014, the company should have deployed the AMI SD meters, that would have been a better decision. And part of the justification for that decision is, well, Ameren and Liberty have moved forward with those deployments. Do you know what years Ameren and Liberty moved forward with those deployments?
So to the best of my recollection, Ameren moved forward with MISD rollout in 2021, and it will be continuing till 2025. My years might be a little off. So at that time, they were replacing AMR meters also, and to the best of my recollection, those are about the 1990s vintage.
Okay, so Ameren's decision came 7 years after this disputed 2014 decision by Evergy. Is that fair?
So Evergy in 2014 replaced AMR meters with AMI meters, and then 7 years later, they're replacing those fairly recently installed AMI meters with AMI meters that have the ability to disconnect and reconnect customers.
Correct.
So OPC, I think in their opening today, discussed the decision in 2014. I'm sorry, is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, that's the question, because they're comparing, at least my interpretation of the argument is they're comparing a decision in 2014 and saying, look, they should have not done this. Ameren and Liberty went straight to AMISD. But my question is, Ameren and Liberty made that decision with 7 more years of information. Is that accurate?
They did have more information, and 7 years is about the right timeline, I think.
Okay, thank you. No further questions, Judge.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention that Commissioner Coleman has also joined us online. Are there other commissioner questions? Okay, I have 1 or 2 questions that's kind of long, so bear with me. And I'm sorry if you covered this earlier, but I just want to make sure I get everyone's questions. On page 3 of your SIR rebuttal, lines 3 through 6. Give you just a second to get there.
Yes.
So lines 3 through 6, you updated staff's proposed disallowances to basically $6.3 million and $2.9 million for Evergy Metro and Evergy West. Later in that paragraph at lines 9 through 11, you state that staff's disallowances are for exchanges for unknown reasons and meters exchanged solely to gain the remote connection disconnection feature. Can you provide a breakdown of your proposed 6.3 disallowance for Metro between unknown reasons and meter exchange solely to gain remote reconnection, disconnection features, and the same for West?
I can. That should be an attachment to my surrebuttal testimony, though I'm not seeing it. Staff can provide that, though. I thought it was an attachment. I apologize.
Okay, so that would require,
Just me printing a PDF. Yeah.
okay. Is that something you think you can get while we're still here today?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. We'll hold off on that and maybe if there's some additional questions, bring you back at the end here? Sure. Okay. Okay, let's do that then. Are there any further cross-examination questions based on questions from the bench, from public counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Eubanks, you were asked a question by the chairman regarding the fact that Ameren, Missouri might have had more information when it made the decision to switch over.
Sure.
Evergy is making an argument that there are numerous benefits to these AMI meters, and I believe you were asked a long series of questions regarding potential benefits from counsel for Evergy. You would agree with me that all of those benefits existed in 2014, correct?
They did, yeah.
So there would be no need for more information.
Well, I will say that as far as I understand.
Thank you, fair enough. There would be no need for more information to know what the benefits of an AMI SD over an AMI meter are.
I agree.
And if Evergy had made the decision to put these AMI SD in 2014 when it knew all the benefits, customers would have saved money. As compared to what they did in this case of installing AMI and then replacing them early.
I think the financial reviews produced by the company does not show what they actually did. It's assuming $76 in 2014. In reality, it took many years to deploy AMI meters. They barely finished their AMI deployment before they started the AMI SD deployment. In fact, I think that's part of why you see in Brad Lutz's direct testimony that he doesn't even mention AMI SD meters as a separate, distinct rollout of meters.
But you would agree with me that it would have been less expensive for the company to have just installed AMI SD in 2014 and gotten all the benefits that are supposed to come with them than to have installed AMI and turned around and ripped them out in 8 years.
Quite honestly, I have not done that calculation.
Fair enough. No further questions.
Thank you. Is there any further cross-examination based on bench questions from MECG?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
From Renew Missouri?
No questions, Your Honor.
Evergy?
Just briefly, there was I think a reference, Ms. Eubanks, to your amounts of the disallowances that are on page 3 at line 6 in your SIR rebuttal.
Yes.
My question is, I used different numbers in my opening statement based upon what our understanding of the reconciliation shows. Would the reconciliation be the most current numbers?
The reconciliation includes the reserve adjustment also. Yes, that's correct.
So the
So
numbers.
that would be 6% essentially for GMO and 9% for Case Vanel. That's correct.
So the 5.7 million and the 2.6 or 2.7 million would be the current amount of the disallowance, from your understanding?
That sounds about right.
Okay, great. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Eric from staff. Are there any differences between Ameren's knock and collect waiver between Evergy's proposed?
Can you rephrase the question?
You mentioned differences between Ameren's knock and collect waiver. What would those differences be?
So I think what I said was there is a difference between Ameren, Missouri's deployment strategy as it relates to the knock and collect variants and Evergy's. Staff has filed a recommendation in the knock and collect variants case that was dismissed, and we'll reevaluate in the new case if it's necessary to do so.
What was different about Ameren's?
This is something that we discussed a little bit with Chairman Sylvie. Ameren's, they rolled out AMR meters initially, and it was not until 2021 that they chose to switch to the service disconnect meters. One thing about their plan is they're deploying meters geographically. So they're moving through an area, all the customers, all the neighbors are getting new meters at the same time, and then they move to another area. So it's very thought out deployment strategy.
Is Evergy doing the same thing, moving them all out at the same time?
They are only going to, as I understand it, large apartment complexes, those customers with arrears. To my knowledge, they're not doing any kind of geographic installation.
I want to move on to the cost of AMI SDs. Are costs of AMI SDs currently known and measurable?
Yes.
Are the benefits of AMI SD currently known and measurable?
I think what you're asking is, do we see evidence in this case that customers are receiving a reduction in O&M related to the AMI SDs that they've deployed to date? And to my knowledge, we are not. Specifically, the company, and I don't want to get into HC information, but part of the financial review included, I guess, can I keep going? I don't want to get into highly confidential information.
Do we need to go on camera? We can do that if you want. But go ahead please, if you can stay out of it, that's fine with me.
Is there something in your testimony that you can just point to without saying it?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Or we can go in camera if you need to.
Yeah, so on page 7, lines 5 through 10, I discussed some of my concerns with.
And that's your sir rebuttal?
That's my sir rebuttal interim direct testimony, yes. What was estimated in benefits and how that relates to what we've seen in this case, all of page 7.
All right. So are the former AMIs used and useful to customers today?
The ones that have been removed from service?
Yes.
No.
I want to move on to disaggregate. What does disaggregate mean?
So when Mr. Casely was talking about AMI disaggregation, he's talking about data analytics on, the data received from AMI meters and being able to see what customers are doing on their side of the meter.
Can you explain the analytics at all?
I guess I don't know.
All right, it's
what
okay, I'll
exact-
move on.
Okay.
All right. But how does it work?
So without getting into too many of the details, I mean, they're using, computers to figure out when customers are doing certain things on their side of the meter.
Does the commission have rules on meter accuracy?
The commission does have rules on meter accuracy and testing of meters. That was something else I discussed in my rebuttal testimony.
Have you seen any testimony of their disaggregation is within their accuracy limit?
So I think you're asking about the meter testing rules and not disaggregation. Evergy had, or Case Midell had a variance for a period of time for their meter sampling program that expired in 2018. I'm sorry, in 2016. Is that what you're asking about?
Yes.
Judge, I think I'd like to interpose an objection. If we're talking about meter testing rules, I don't think that was brought up at any point during the cross or questions from the bench.
Then I'll let it go and move on. One final question. Mr. Fisher asked you about a list of benefits of the newer meters. Did you factor all of the benefits when you considered a disallowance?
I think what's really difficult is the company didn't provide direct testimony supporting the service disconnect, the AMI SD meters in their direct testimony. So the staff's looking at it. Of course, yes, they say that there are benefits like access issues and that quite honestly, that's why I limited my disallowance to not include those. So yes, we factored it in, but as far as the benefits to the company that they're saying, they didn't quantify those. That's not in the net present value revenue requirement calculation that Mr. Casely presents in his rebuttal or surrebuttal testimony.
So given the bulk of the evidence you've seen so far, do you still recommend the disallowance?
I do.
No further questions?
Thank you. And Ms. Eubanks and staff counsel, I asked for her to provide the breakdown of the disallowance in her rebuttal testimony, and she said she could get that PDF. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask them to bring that in and send out a copy to everybody, or give everybody a copy as soon as you can. And then I will ask if there are objections and if we need to have some additional cross-examination based on that.
Kleiser from OPC, can I query really quick, is that in your work papers?
Yes, it is my work papers. I intended to attach it as a schedule. I think something very similar is attached to my direct testimony.
The OPC does not need to be sent a copy then. We already
Okay.
have our work papers. Thank you.
Okay.
Judge, I would appreciate seeing what she's got to give the commission.
That would be fine, yes. Just go ahead and send that out. And so for now, you can step down, but if you remain available to be recalled if necessary.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've been going quite a while here. It's almost 10:15, so I think this is a good place for a break. If there's nothing before we go off the record, I'm not seeing anything, then let's go ahead and take a break until 10:30. And we can go off the record. So we have returned from our break just a few minutes later than I anticipated, but we're going to get started. Mr. Mark has already made his way to the stand. Mr. Mark, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give at this hearing will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Public counsel, you can go ahead with your witness.
I tender the witness of cross.
And it was noted that Dr. Mark's testimony was admitted earlier. So is there cross-examination from staff?
Yes, Your Honor. How are you made aware of Evergy's decision to replace AMIs with AMI-SDs?
I became aware of the situation in the EE docket, the original door knock waiver request from the company that was filed earlier this year. In technical conferences, it became known to me that the company was actually changing out their existing AMI meters with the AMI service disconnect meters through discovery. I guess that was handled by staff.
You evaluated Evergy's cost-benefit analysis on the AMIs, correct?
I did.
You disagree with Evergy's analysis?
I do.
Under your analysis, there's not a benefit to customers from Evergy's replacement of AMIs with AMI-SDs, correct?
It's a great question. I would qualify it. I mean, so I'm not saying that there's a hard stop, that there are no benefits attributed from the service disconnect. So obviously, the ability to disconnect is the benefit. It's the question, what I think you're asking is whether or not the benefits outweigh the cost. And it's not just the cost of that meter, but the cost of the previous meter that's not fully depreciated, as well as the cost for labor that's associated with both of them. The one, and there were two financial reviews that were looked at, and Ms. Eubanks spoke to those before, but, the one point that I would mention is that in the present value comparison, importantly, that document limits the amount of years going forward. So if you assume a 20-year lifespan for a meter, whether it's AMI or AMI service disconnect, their present value calculation has it effectively being neutral, that there's very little difference between the two by moving forward with this option. The problem there is that their calculation ended it at the 20-year mark from 2014, so roughly 2034. The full comparison should go out an additional 8 years, so 2032, for example. And that's not factored into the calculation, and those would be real costs that ratepayers would have to bear. So no, I don't believe that the benefits outweigh the cost.
However, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the benefits of AMI.
Sure.
Evergy is fully utilizing all of the time of use capabilities of its AMI, isn't that correct?
So Evergy, it's really easy to get lost in the distinction when we're talking about the benefits of AMI. This is hardware. There's a software component that Mr. Casely spoke about, and that's the CIS system, and there's been extensive software components like the Customer First program and the Uplight programs and so forth. So lots of additional software components added on to that hardware component. The hardware component is a meter reader. That's effectively what it is. It's just reading the meter, all right? There are abilities that can be unlocked with that software component. So are customers receiving the time of use capabilities today? We've run a very small pilot that's been very successful for the company, and I know parties have recommended to move forward more aggressively with time of use rates in this case. But the vast majority of customers have probably never even heard of the term time of use rates. the vast majority of customers aren't, in our opinion, have received the benefits that were implied or at least promised in previous rate cases before this commission.
All right. Evergy mentioned the benefits of reconnect and the disconnect capabilities of the AMIDs. Does the prior AMIs have a reconnect capability at all?
So this meter technology has been around at least since 2007. So the additional feature to be able to go ahead and reconnect and disconnect. And clearly, like the nomenclature says it itself. So when we say AMI SD, it's AMI service disconnect. It's not AMI RD, AMI reconnect, right? Or SR, I guess service reconnect. Today, my understanding is that the existing AMI meters cannot be disconnected or reconnected, and I say the existing, the non-SD meters. So, and due to, the Chapter 13 rules, which we've already talked about, there's a whole procedure that's in place to ensure a really hard-fought customer protection, which is that door knock provision, is still in place.
All right. No other states are having AMI replacement issues, right?
As far as I know, and I would be shocked, quite honestly, to learn of any utility in the United States that's already on their second generation of AMI meters.
Your Honor, I want to go in camera for some qualified, confidential questions.
Okay. All right, and we are back on the public session. Go ahead, Mr. Vandergriff.
You were here for Casely's testimony, correct?
It was.
Is it unique for utilities to have different meter types?
It's not unheard of.
Evergy uses the same contractor for all of its meters, correct?
That's correct.
Your Honor, no further questions from staff.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Mark, I'm going to ask if you could pull that mic just a little toward your, there you go, and make sure you're speaking directly into that. I think there may be a little trouble hearing you.
Sure, I'm always conscious of being too close. So.
Don't worry about being too close. We'll hold our ears. Okay, is there any cross-examination from MECG?
No, thank you, Judge.
Is there anything from Renew Missouri?
No questions, Your Honor.
Is there cross-examination from Evergy?
Just briefly, Judge. Dr. Mark, you mentioned that you disagreed with Evergy's analysis. Is that right?
Yes.
Judge, I'd like to have an exhibit marked. It's a data request that includes Evergy's analysis.
All right.
I don't have but 2 copies. I'm not sure. Do we have more? Okay.
I believe Evergy's next number is 135.
I had it. 37. I have 137.
You have 137?
I have one.
I have 135, but
Oh, well,
I could be wrong. We could make
could we mark it 137 just in case we've already got 136?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Is this being offered for just West?
Well, it hasn't been offered yet.
No.
It's just being marked. Is there, and I apologize, I know there was some question about exhibit numbering for Metro and West earlier in the hearing, but does it need a different number, or is?
This is Roger Steiner talking. We would
Yes.
want the exhibit in both cases, but I don't think it needs to be marked twice.
Yeah, I agree that you can cite to it by its number in either case. I don't think it needs to be in there twice, so. Let's just leave it as Exhibit 137, and that may be skipping over a couple of numbers. Now, Mr. Fisher, you did have copies for everyone, or you didn't?
I did have a copy, as
Okay.
it turns out, thanks to co-counsel.
Okay. Go ahead.
Dr. Mark, I've handed you what's been marked Exhibit 137. Does this appear to be a data request in the 129 case that includes that analysis that you disagreed with?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Judge, I would move for the admission of Exhibit 137.
Would there be any objection to Exhibit 137, which appears to be is this an answer to a data request?
Yes, Judge.
Yes, okay. And it's labeled as question number 2124 in case number ER-2022-0129. Is there any objection to that coming in the record?
Give me just 1 second, Judge. I need to.
It's fine.
No, I don't. I won't object. Can I get what was the number again? I
It
apologize.
was 137,
Thank you.
so no objection?
No objection.
All right, then I will admit Exhibit 137.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you, Judge.
Okay, are there commissioner questions for Dr. Mark? Okay, I'm not hearing any. Let me double check. I do not have any questions. Is there a redirect?
There is, Your Honor. So, good morning, Dr. Mark. I'm paranoid about that now, apparently.
Good morning.
Regarding the Exhibit 137 that was just entered into the record,
Sure.
you were asked by counsel for Evergy that this was the financial report that you disagreed with, correct?
Correct.
Why do you disagree with it?
So, I mean, in any sort of analysis like this, reasonable minds, I guess, can differ over some of the assumptions that are placed into this. But I'll just point out just one quick thing, and I had just said this before with counsel, with Missouri Public Service Commission staff. If you go to second to last page. So the analysis ends in 2034, and if you look at the column labeled, it would be column 7 under 2021. You'll note that's the first year. So let's cross-reference this so we got it. So it's column 7, row 27 is where you've got $201 million increase. And that would be the combination of both meters that are going into place. So the years that preceded it are AMI. The years that follow that are 2 AMIs. And that extends out to 2034, which would account for a 20-year lifespan in total between 2014 and 2034. A full analysis of this would extend 7 additional years to account for the AMI SD.
And that would drastically change the results?
That would flip the cost benefit, and all of a sudden it wouldn't be neutral. Now you have more of a cost to customers. So you can torture data in a lot of different ways to get the result that you want. And in this case, it's just expanding and contracting the parameters to get, in this case, a neutral outcome. So that would be my illustrative example.
Is it a high level? Are there any other major concerns that you would at least draw attention to?
In my testimony, I spoke to him. My concerns over the actual cost associated with installing the meters themselves, the assumptions around them. We didn't, and Ms. Eubank spoke about this before, but the company generally spoke in normative statements throughout their testimony, that there's a lot of benefits, that reduced cost. What's missing from all the testimony is actual just hard facts and data to support those benefits. And a lot of it is speculative at this point. That's not to suggest that there couldn't be benefits from this. We just don't know. There was nothing to compare it off of other than what we were able to look at here. The reduced O&M that they've got in this spreadsheet is effectively meter readers that have been redeployed to other positions, is my understanding. So the assumptions around a lot of those inputs, given the time, would probably be challenged a lot more. But we got this relatively late in amongst the other 147 issues that we were testifying to.
Moving on, you were asked a question briefly by counsel for staff regarding the rollout of AMI meters in other states. I believe you had mentioned something about you would be surprised if any other state was on their second generation of meters. Do you recall that?
I do. I'm sorry.
Just give me a second there. With regard to other states, it's true that there are a number of states that aren't even on their first rollout of AMI meters, correct?
That's correct.
Why do you consider that to be an important consideration here?
So utility regulatory states either fall into one or the other category. Either they're pre-approval states where, you know, the utilities come in and say, here's our plan, here's the cost benefit analysis, this is what we'd like to do, please commission approve this. Or after the fact, where, you know, we've enforced that prudence review process like we do in Missouri. In states where, first of all, AMI has been knocked down in both types of states, if in situations where the benefits have not produced enough to cover the cost. In Missouri, we look at the investments after the fact. Management is effectively making managerial decisions. We're not paid to make those decisions. But if we see that the utility is outside the lines, that they're effectively beefing up rate base in a situation where it would not call for it, we call them out on it. And that's a situation that we have before us here. So it's absolutely appropriate that we raise this issue in the context of this rate case, in how we set it up. But Massachusetts, Virginia, New Mexico, Kentucky, these are all states that commissions denied AMI deployment because the companies did not have a plan in place for rolling out time of use rates, or were able to go ahead and convincingly make a case that the benefits outweighed the overall cost. Meters are not, you know, an end-all be-all item at the end of the day. I mean, the primary function of a meter is just to capture your energy usage. That's it. That's the most important thing. And anything above and beyond that really needs to have a basis for this, let alone replacing it for a second meter after we just got it. So it's...
You were also asked a question about the benefits of reconnect and disconnect, and I'm pretty sure you had made something about they're called SD, not SR. Do you recall that?
I do.
What is the difference between reconnects and disconnects, and why is that important here?
I look at it primarily as a function of framing. You know, you look at how Landis & Gear sells this application to utilities. It says a service disconnect. That's the value, is being able to more quickly disconnect a customer. I know the company has reframed it as a benefit, that this is a reconnect benefit. I would, and I said this in my testimony, I look at this as, well, what if we raise this issue in front of the public? What if we put it out in front of, you know, customers and said, well, now the ability to be disconnected is much easier. And oh, by the way, those customers that have arrearages or our renters are going to be the priority customers to receive this service. I'd venture to say you would get a backlash.
Judge, I'm going to object. I'm hearing a lot of speculation in this answer.
This was all in my testimony.
We'll look at it in your testimony then, Dr. Mark.
Thank you.
You were asked a question from staff counsel about benefits outweighing the cost. Do you remember that line of questioning?
I do.
Let's start with, you were also specifically asked a question whether or not the time of use rates, or time of use ability, maybe I should say, were being utilized. Do you recall that?
I do.
Is AMI-SD, or rather is the service disconnect function of these AMI meters necessary for time of use rates?
No. All of the benefits that we should be able to get from time of use rates and rate design can be enabled through the existing AMI meters that are in place today that have not been replaced.
And the benefits that do come with these meters, we could be achieving if they had been installed earlier.
That's correct.
Moving broadly to the overall question of whether or not the benefits outweigh the costs. Is your position that there is the benefit of AMI-SD is never going to be outweighed by the costs of AMI-SD?
I mean, it's a matter of timing.
Can you explain that?
Sure. If I was replacing AMI AMR with AMI-SD, we would do the same analysis. We would look at the cost-benefit analysis for any type of meter in any type of situation. The key difference here is that there's been a large-scale investment in AMI meters that are just a couple years old and that are being ripped out again. Those costs negate the benefits many times over that would be incurred from bringing on the AMI-SD meters. Again, effectively just one feature, the ability to disconnect, reconnect.
So to summarize, it's not about the prudence of installing AMI-SD. The problem here is the decision to install AMI and immediately replace them with AMI-SD.
We never raised a prudence issue with installing AMI meters in 2014 or the subsequent rate cases that happened after that. It was only, really, it was only out of, you know, a byproduct of another discussion from another case that I even became aware that they were taking out all of the AMI meters and replacing them with Generation 2 AMI meters because it wasn't in their filed direct testimony. That's what makes it imprudent.
I believe you mentioned something about these meters being available from 2007. Is that accurate?
At least, yes.
And to your knowledge, those are the same meters that Evergy is now currently putting on?
Yes.
I think I have no further redirect. Thank you, Your Honor.
Judge, this is Jim Fisher. I think I should have marked that last exhibit with a C because it is confidential, so it'd be 137C.
All right, I have marked that, and it is confidential.
Your Honor, does that mean that the portions of the testimony on it?
No, we didn't get into anything that was of a concern.
Okay.
And there was one other answer that Dr. Mark gave that I was concerned was a confidential item.
I heard a name of a vendor. I think that was under seal, but I don't think that is a concern. He could be talking about it generically.
I apologize, Your Honor, if that inadvertently happened. I was trying to stay away from redirecting on the confidential material earlier.
That's fine. All right, then that concludes Dr. Mark's testimony, and you may be excused.
Thank you.
I believe we have one more public counsel witness. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give at this hearing will be the truth?
I do.
And would you please spell your name?
Sure, my name is John Robinett, and it's R-O-B-I-N-E-T-T.
Go ahead.
As Your Honor previously noted, Mr. Robinett's testimony has already been offered and accepted, and I will therefore immediately tender the witness for cross-examination. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kleiser. Is there cross-examination from staff?
No, Your Honor.
From MECG?
No, thank you, Judge.
Renew Missouri?
No questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Evergy?
No, thank you, Judge.
Are there any commissioner questions for Mr. Robinett?
No questions, Judge.
Okay. I have one question, but it relates to what I was asking Ms. Eubanks to provide. So let me see if I can still ask it. Oh yeah, we can still get this. You're familiar with Ms. Eubanks' rebuttal testimony, correct?
Honestly, not really, Judge.
No?
I have a copy of it.
Well, I was gonna ask, but if you're not that familiar with it, I don't know. I'll ask the question, and if you can't answer, just say so. In her rebuttal testimony, she updated staff's proposed disallowances for the early replacement of AMI meters to 6.3 million generally and 2.9 generally. I hope those aren't confidential numbers, right? Yeah, okay. Do you have an opinion about those proposed updated disallowance amounts?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any further redirect, or I'm sorry, further cross-examination based on my question from staff,
No, Your Honor.
MECG,
No, thank you, Judge.
Renew,
No, Your Honor.
and Evergy?
None.
All right then. Is there any redirect based on that question?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Robinette.
Thank you.
I believe you may be excused.
Your Honor, if this is a good time, I'd like to offer what I've provided to council and to Your Honor, MECG Exhibit 409, and that is the order approving stipulations from Evergy West's most recent rate case, ER-2018-0146.
And that was discussed yesterday, is that correct?
Yes, it was discussed, and I don't believe any parties have any issue with that.
Is there, let me ask first, have the other parties seen that exhibit?
I haven't.
I have sent it to everyone. I don't know if they've looked at it.
I haven't had the opportunity to check my email, but I have no objection to it, presuming that it's the information available from EFIS.
Evergy has no objection either, Judge.
Okay. Is there any other objection to Exhibit 409? Seeing none, then I will admit Exhibit 409 or take official notice of that exhibit and see.
Thank you, Your Honor.
What's the status of the additional information I asked for from Ms. Eubanks? Do we need to take a brief break to?
Sorry, Judge, I didn't hear your question.
I was trying to see from staff if they were able to locate that additional information I was requesting.
All right, it was made available, you should have it.
Okay, well, that's true. I've received an email. I just wanted to make sure everybody else had received that.
Your Honor, we're looking at it now. Could we possibly go off the record so we could review it? We just got it.
Yeah, let's take like a 10-minute break. Is that sufficient, you think? Or
Yes.
do you need more time? Okay, let's take a quick 10-minute break. Let the parties look at that exhibit, and then we'll maybe bring Ms. Eubanks back up here. So I've got 11:09. Let's make it 11 minutes and come back at 11:20. Let's go ahead and go off the record. So council have all had a chance to look at that exhibit. It would be marked as, we're going to give it a staff number even though the commission asked for it, as exhibit number 284, and that's a breakdown of the staff disallowance between unknown reasons and meter exchange solely to gain remote reconnect, disconnect. Let's see what the, if the document has a title. It does not, but it's a spreadsheet or table of that information. Am I describing that correctly?
Might I offer work papers of Claire Eubanks as a title?
That sounds very good, concise. Thank you. So,
Your Honor, this is Roger Steiner.
Yes.
I thought there was a exhibit called Cunnigan Work Papers that was 284. Did you give this one a number yet?
I have not.
Okay.
I
And then
mean, I was going to give it 284, but is there another 284? I didn't have that on my,
I have a scribble here, but I'll check, I'll defer to staff.
I think maybe just do 285 just to be safe.
okay.
And I had one other comment.
Let's mark that as 285, and that is Eubanks Work Papers.
The-
Yes, sir.
The email that I got it said the schedule is confidential, so could it be marked 285C?
Yes, it can, 285C. And I'm assuming it's the numbers in that that are confidential. I'm looking at heads nodding. Okay, so we have marked that. I'm going to just ask if there are going to be any objections to that coming into the record.
This is something the commission requested, no objections, Your Honor.
All right, seeing no objections, then 285C is admitted. And would there be a need for further cross-examination based on that exhibit?
No need from the company?
Does,
No need from OPC.
all right. I'm not seeing any additional cross-examination for Ms. Eubanks then, so Ms. Eubanks, you may be excused.
Your Honor?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Staff would like an opportunity for redirect.
Oh, all right.
Just to explain
Based-
these work
based-
papers.
Your Honor, there's no questions, so I don't understand.
Well, let me, first, I forgot to ask if the commissioners had any questions about this newly presented exhibit. And I'm not hearing any, and I didn't have anything specific to ask. I'm going to indulge staff in this case, in case there is some information that I have missed, since I'm kind of playing it by ear today. So, Ms. Eubanks, would you like to come back to the witness stand, please? I'll give the other parties a chance to catch up if something is needed. And Ms. Eubanks, you were previously sworn, so. Go ahead, Mr. Vandergriff. Did you have additional question?
Yes, Your Honor. In your work papers, you categorized the meter model as GMO. What does that mean?
So GMO is referring to Evergy, Missouri West meter replacements.
You also have KCPLM. What does that mean?
That's referring to Evergy, Missouri Metro meter replacements.
One of your columns is called Focus AL. What does that mean?
So those are the AMI meters that we've been discussing today. that do not have service disconnect capability.
You also have Focus AS. What does that mean?
So there are a lot of different model types of meters on this. The other one that we've spoken a lot about is the Focus AXR SD, which is the service disconnect meters. There's slight differences in each of these meter types. We didn't get into a lot of detail for that, but these are all the meters that were exchanged in the time period that I looked at.
Is RXR considered a meter version as well?
Yeah, every column is a meter type. The unknown column is not, in my testimony, when I refer to unknown, that's the reason for the exchange. This column is actually representing older meters that, they don't have records of anymore of what types of meters they are that were, provided in the data set at least. So that's not factored into staff's disallowance. Just wanted to make that clear. Those are older meters.
Now, on your work paper, at the bottom of the page, there's two separate columns, one amounting to 2.9 million, the other 6.3 million.
Let's stay away from numbers.
So I think staff's
The
disallowance.
totals are, I'm sorry.
It's what I testified to before,
Yeah.
or we testified to before.
Yes, I apologize. The totals are fine. Go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted. You want to repeat your question?
All right. Those numbers are in reference to your surrebuttal?
Those are my surrebuttal true-up direct testimony values, yes.
Now, the 6% and 9% we have, is that reference to the reconciliation?
That's correct. That's the reserve adjustment.
No further.
Goes with it, so, yep.
Sorry about that. No further questions, Your Honor.
I appreciate your questions, Mr. Vandergriff, and I'm going to continue because some of the acronyms and so forth, I'm not sure what's in the record and what's not. So let's just continue along the top column, and can you just define each of those acronyms for the various types of meters?
That's just the name of the meter. So, we've been using a shorthand of AMI versus AMI SD. That's just the meter manufacturer might name each meter something different, and they have slightly different capabilities. So, I don't have a list handy
Okay.
that we could run through. Apologize.
Okay, so each one is just a different kind of meter and,
Yes.
okay. I'm just looking down the column of the other terms to see if there's anything there that might need further definition. Okay, I think that's fine. Are there any other questions based on those questions? Because I'm really kind of considering those questions from the bench as far as,
I just want to follow up really quick on that. So the ones that have a hyphen SD are the service disconnects.
So we were looking at exchanged meters. So yes, if there were any instances of replacing a SD meter with another SD meter.
I'm just, the column along the top, I'm just looking at that
Yep.
top row.
Anything with an SD is a service disconnect.
Thanks. And are the RXRs, are those meters with or without the service disconnect function?
Those are without that.
Without?
Yes.
All right, sorry, that was my only question. Thank you.
Yep.
okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Ms. Eubanks? I know we're kind of taking things a little out of order here, but that's,
The company doesn't have any and appreciates staff's clarifications.
all right. I'm assuming the commissioners have no further questions for Ms. Eubanks. Not hearing any. So, Ms. Eubanks, this time you may be excused. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I believe that is our last scheduled witness for today. Tuesday is, the hearing will resume. For now, 8:30 is the start time. Are there any other issues or questions before we go off the record? Right?
Hey, Judge, it's Commissioner Roop.
Yes, sir.
Just wanted to say great job and thanks for filling in for Judge Hatcher today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Your Honor, before we move on, I just want to clarify that staff had Exhibit 211, both public and confidential, 238, both public and confidential, and Exhibit 262, both public and confidential, admitted into evidence.
Those were admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything further? Seeing nothing, we can adjourn for the day. We can go off the record.